Everybody, it's Fernando Labastida here once again with Martechify, where we interview thought leaders. Really excited to have here with us today Rebecca Farabaugh. Welcome, Rebecca, to the interview. How are things over there in Pittsburgh at the moment?
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Things in Pittsburgh are lovely. We're having unseasonably beautiful weather, so the sun always helps.
So, Rebecca, I was wondering if you could tell us about your career trajectory. How did you get started, and what led you to where you are right now?
My background is in marketing research, marketing and brand strategy, and I got into that work through the creative side. So when I was younger, I always told people, I'm a word person, I'm not a numbers person, and really enjoyed writing and that side of the creative side of storytelling. And then as I progressed through my career, I started to realize that I was also really fascinated by this whole data side and the scientific side of marketing. And at the time, I was working at the University of Pittsburgh, and so was able to connect to a program there and completed my master's in marketing science. So sort of rounded out from this very creative background, then moving into that scientific and really data-focused space. And how do we use that to make our marketing more effective and efficient and deliver sort of those quality marketing campaigns, combining now sort of the science with the creative storytelling. So that is why I refer to myself that way. How do I use that in an everyday situation right now? I would say for me, sort of everything always starts with the data, right? So for example, stories are very subjective, right? Because people are different. Every person is different. And so what resonates with me may not resonate with you. And so for us to even begin to tell a story, whether that's demonstrating impact to a donor or recruiting undergraduate students, as I was doing at Pitt, we have to first understand who it is that we're talking to, right? And so that's where I think it really starts. And I've been fortunate in my career to work with many wonderful marketing research partners, as well as to do a lot of that work on my own, both pulling in that quantitative data where we can get a sense of, as a group, what's happening with our people, what are the trends, how are things going, how are things changing over time, but also really getting to weave in that qualitative data. So, and that's really the part that lights me up, because I think that's where we find the story, right? So we can sort of get a pulse on what's happening with the people we want to talk to from quantitative. But when we get into the qualitative research, it's really where, like I said, that story starts to emerge. It's not just what's happening, but it's where we find why it's happening. And that just then leads right into the storytelling component. When I think about how technology has helped me with that, it just runs the gamut. So from, collecting research, right? Just leveraging new, more and advanced survey tools and equipment has been really helpful. Throughout the pandemic, the way we did qualitative research, right, significantly changed when we weren't able to be in person. So really being able to leverage the really great digital focus group and interview spaces where we can gather groups virtually. So it just really expands the reach and the audience and those folks that we can talk to. And still being able to bring in all those great elements, like being in the viewing room, you're just sort of off camera now instead of, behind a double mirror. So in the research in particular, in that data collection phase, really leveraging technology. And of course, as we get into AI and more emergent AI, especially in the marketing research space, that's also just opened so many possibilities. So started to dabble a little bit with certainly using AI to help us write better surveys and analyze the data. That's been a practice for a long time, but now we're actually starting to see how can AI give us virtual research participants, right? So whereas in the past I might have had my marketing persona on a piece of paper and it was in my head and in my team and we could apply that, now we're seeing the possibility of being able to build these virtual personas. So we, could potentially get to a space where as a marketer and as a market researcher, I can directly ask my customer, right, through this interactive persona, who, leveraging AI, is able to respond in real time to the questions that I have. So obviously that's like, there's still a lot of research being done on both the pros and cons of going that direction. But it is really cool to see how those things are evolving market research and enhancing the things that we've been relying on for so long. So
Cool. I was recently been kind of delving into, creating custom GPTs as well as Claude projects, and how you bring in all your past, whatever, if you're a writer, all your past articles so that it could, you know, put out an article that's as close to the real you as possible. So I'm wondering if these virtual survey respondents are similar. If you add as much data from real people so that this could be as close of an analog to a real person as possible.
exactly, yes, that is exactly the hope and the design. That it would be, effectively you're feeding all of that information, training the model on all of these pieces of information about these individuals, so that you are getting that authentic and honest, real feedback, as if it was, from that person, based on curating all of the data and applying the technology. So
Perfect. So, Rebecca, how do you get the stories from the data? I mean, I kind of have these recurring thoughts of the Matrix, where they're looking at these streams of numbers, et cetera, going through, and I'm thinking, how are they interpreting, stuff from looking at that? But it's like, how do you get the stories from the data?
For me, like I said, I rely really heavily on that blend of both quantitative and qualitative data. I can give an example. I'll tell a story. Imagine that, in answer to your question. So in a previous position, I was working for an area utility company, and was focused on customer experience. And I was doing insights and marketing research around their customer base. And being a very people-focused person, one of the first things I realized was, it's our employees, it's our team members who are creating the experience that our customers are having. So while, yes, I'm very interested in what we can learn about our external customers, what do we need to understand about our employees and those people who are creating that experience? Where are they on this sort of understanding of being customer-centric, and why does it matter? And so started with, the quantitative research, did a survey, gathered a ton of data from all across the company, really getting a sense of, like I said, what is people's perception of customer centricity? Do they think it's important? Do they see their fit in it? And as I was looking at the quantitative data, I started to see pockets where we were seeing particularly lower scores. And looking at the areas that those were emerging, I started to see sort of this theme of lack of connection to this idea, lack of connection to purpose or connection to customer. And so as I was looking at those specific answers and I started to sort of see these groupings, it led me to get curious about that particular area. So, of course, the first thing I did was look at sort of the open-ended feedback. So qual-light, right? Pulling in those, okay, well, what are we seeing related to these as far as open-ended themes go? And that starts to kind of give you some messaging for a story. But then we really moved into some qualitative space. I invited folks from across the organization to come in and do focus groups with us, leverage some human-centered design methodologies to get people to think and articulate things a little bit differently. And that was really where I was able to really start to understand, okay, this number, this 62% translates to this actual experience or this feeling that this employee is having. And out of that was able to then create really like the foundation for what we needed to address as a culture moving forward to shift to this sort of customer focus. So I think, like I said, it's that blend. It's starting with we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at the data, but those themes sort of emerge, and where can we get curious, and where does that lead us to start to have those more in-depth conversations, where then the story just kind of rises to the surface.
I love that, because what you're essentially doing is you're using data to identify these trends. But then but to really understand the trend, what's going on, then you got to go to the actual human and understand, well, what's the feeling behind that? What's the actual situation behind that? Why did why do you feel that way?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and what you just said, I think, is the key. It's that people-centric approach, which is just very much what's important to me. It's one of my top values. It's the way that I lead. It's the way that I work. Always with that kind of focus on people.
There, it kind of leads me to your presentation called, was it Lighten Up? Yeah, it was Lighten Up. And so I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about this concept, and where it came from and how it's, helping you currently, and how it can help other companies in that drive between humanizing data, creating more connection at work, and at the end of the day, making companies more people centric.
So Lighten Up came from basically all of my experiences so far in my career, as well as sort of the current climate of work right now, right? So since the pandemic, backing up. So even before the pandemic, certainly employee engagement in the United States was struggling. We were seeing declines as early as 2012. So it's not a new problem, but I think the pandemic reframed employee engagement and satisfaction challenges in a very new way. And post-pandemic, it is a big problem that a lot of employers are struggling with. What do employees want work to look like now? Expectations are shifting, values have shifted, and just what experiences employees are seeking is different. And so, I always find it, you can't scroll through LinkedIn or Google anything without running into a bunch of headlines about what do we do about employee satisfaction and declining engagement across the country. And people are approaching that in all sorts of different ways. And so Lighten Up came from sort of that climate, and me spending a lot of time thinking about, as a professional, what are my values? What's important to me? What do I want to bring every day outside of just the skills that I can bring? What's the real value that I want to drive in the world around me, in the environments I'm in? And what I came to was sort of this brand statement, if you will, that is, I spark the power within people to create lighter lives. And I think of that in a couple of ways. So lighter lives, in that one of my gifts is being able to translate complicated data into those easy to understand and actionable stories. A second one is leveraging human-centered design to help people bring creative solutions to even the most challenging problems. And the third one is, just in general, I truly believe that meaningful work can and should be fun. So as I started to think through all of that, I started to think, how might this show up in this current climate, and how might this approach, my approach, sort of help folks who are struggling with that engagement and satisfaction right now? And so the Lighten Up approach is what I came up with, and it's focused on what I like to call the light touch. So the concept is everything that we do as an organization, every problem that we solve is actually about a person, right? So if we're solving a technology problem, it's to solve it for the person who will use it. If we're solving a process problem, it's because it's not working for a person. So how do we then focus on the person first? And so in that way, it's sort of founded on the idea that people are not problems to be solved, right? People just need a little bit of support, or what I like to call a light touch. So it's about leveraging a couple of skills. So listening, investigating, gathering, leveraging humor, and then testing. So it's the light touch, L-I-G-H-T. And the idea is really applying, keeping people at the center what are the activities and behaviors that we want to bring to any situation, whether it's the culture of an organization or a specific project or a problem that we're solving. What are those behaviors that we bring to the situation that actually help people feel connected, engaged, and more satisfied? And at the same time, lead to better outcomes, which is always a good thing. So it's truly a win-win for me.
I mean, that sounds really cool and kind of almost suspiciously like what developers use when they try to create user-friendly software. Using user stories, right? So that it's so that the software that they create is intuitive, as opposed to this endlessly complicated maze that they're just going to get lost in, and they're going to throw their hands up and say, I give up, I'm not going to use, I'm going to go back to my manual way of doing things. But at the end of the day, it is the user, right? Or the person, and it is trying to figure out how we can make things better, easier, more comfortable, more meaningful for the user. And I really love your approach with the light touch and making it fun, because I think at the end of the day, it's supposed to be fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah. And, to your point about really keeping people at the center, when I think about the data storytelling side, one of the things that comes to mind for me is I think data storytelling can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. And I think in certain spaces in the data realm, it's almost become even like a dirty word. Like, we're so tired of people saying, like, tell a story with your data. I actually have a really good friend who's been working in information technology and data longer than I have. And recently she actually said to me, she said, I'm sort of losing faith in this space, because I feel like no matter what I do, when I present the data, it only does one of two things. I get one of two reactions. The first is, oh, good, that affirmed what I thought, I was right. And the second is, well, that isn't what I expected, your data must be wrong. And I think that's something that anyone who works in data and in marketing, where you're trying to influence perception and change behavior or influence behavior, I think it's a feeling that we've all had, that frustration of like, we can know everything, and we have more data available now than ever before, of course. And it can feel like there's just so much out there that having actionable ways to translate that into human, right, is so critical in overcoming that rut of like, it affirmed or it's wrong, and really being able to, because stories are what connect with people, right? There's a great quote that says, I won't get it exactly right, but something like, human brains aren't wired to remember facts and figures and data. They're not. But we are wired to remember stories, right? So it's like we have all this data out there, and we're trying to get people to take it seriously. We're trying to inspire action, and we have to be able to translate it into something that will resonate and motivate and mean something to people. And that's a story, right? So yeah, I just find it really interesting. I think, again, for me, like, no matter what it is I'm thinking about, it's always coming back to like, it's a person that it's a person that is the focus, no matter what it is I'm trying to accomplish. So.
Okay, so given that it's the person, and sometimes data can be either maligned or praised for either confirming what we believe or falling far from expectations, what do you see as trends for 2025 in your current role? You're doing donor management, which is a marketing role. So in terms of 2025, what do you see are trends for not just marketing technology, but data and storytelling technology? You touched on that briefly with regards to AI and how you can create virtual survey respondents. But what do you see coming down the pike next year, maybe even the next 2 years, to help you do your job in terms of telling stories, making things human-centric, and really enhancing the data to tell that story?
Yeah. Gosh, that's a good question. It's a tough one. Yeah, so as far as emerging trends or what I see coming, of course, I see a lot of more development and proliferation in AI. And I see that sort of on both ends of the marketing spectrum. Mentioned some of the developments I see coming on the marketing research side of the house. And of course, already we're relying on tools to help us start our storytelling, right? Always easier to edit a story than it is to write one from scratch. So leveraging tools like ChatGPT can be a great benefit to writers and storytellers like myself. Can help us get more work done, optimize, and make more efficient the stories that we're telling. But at the same time, there's always that that sort of fear, I guess, that we never want those tools to become exclusive of having that human touch, right? So that's one of the reasons I love the insight space so much, is that I really see it as that human component. I feel that what makes human beings human is our ability to make meaning, to give things meaning. And so having that human sit right in between all of these growing tools that can make our research stronger, all of these growing tools that can make the creative side of marketing easier and more efficient and give us greater output, right in the middle of that, I think, remains that human who really needs to be able to translate one to the other and to be able to create the meaning and make it resonate with the people who are at the end of that marketing campaign or that marketing product.
Well, Rebecca, this has really been an eye-opening conversation with you. I love the light touch. If only I had been able to affect something like that at the previous job where I worked, that would have been fantastic. Rebecca, where can people find you online? Where can people actually hear your speeches and podcasts, etc.?
Yeah, the best way to connect with me is definitely on LinkedIn. So just my full name, Rebecca-Farabaugh. I'm always on LinkedIn, and you can message me, connect with me. Love to connect with folks there.
Thank you so much for spending this hour with us, for giving us of your valuable time. And I really look forward to hopefully having you on as a guest again sometime soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a great time here talking about Martech and all things storytelling and data. Always happy to be here. Thank you so much.